Hi everyone, you're listening to Responsible Business with Loud Law. I'm the founder and your host, Loes van Dijk. Now more than ever, people are dedicating their lives to building businesses that positively impact people and our planet. And on this show, I will unpack the incredible purpose-driven founder journeys through ideation, all the way to reporting on their impact, to uncover the opportunities and strategies that they're using so that you can feel equipped in building your own sustainable impact business. On today's episode, we have Claudia Gwinnutt, founder of Circla, a fully circular beauty brand on a mission to change the way consumers discover and enjoy their beauty routines with plastic-free and ethical products. Believing that convenience is the key to switching to a refillable lifestyle, Claudia has founded Circla in 2019 to take the faff out of reusable packaging by delivering products directly to your doorstep and picking them up to refill once empty. So think the milkman of beauty. Since her launch, Claudia has scaled Circla quite rapidly to build a brighter and a more thoughtful future for us all. In this conversation, I'd like to dig a little bit deeper on how Claudia has kept her vision alive from launch to growth, particularly when it came to finding the right investors to help her scale the business. So I am very, very excited to have you join me today, Claudia. Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me on. I'm really, really excited to chat. It does always feel quite weird when someone introduces you. You're like, oh, yeah, that's me.
Yeah, exactly. So to start off with, I would really like to know where your journey began. So did you always consider yourself to have more of an entrepreneurial mindset, or was it more of a learning curve, jumping from your corporate role at Barclays to launching your own sustainable business?
I think if you speak to my parents, they'd most probably say that I did always have an entrepreneurial mindset. But I guess when I finished school and went to university, we're talking like 2008, the kind of access to information around startups, and that was just hadn't yet happened really, like people didn't even have iPhones in their hands yet. So that kind of startup world was probably literally just starting. So it just wasn't ever something when I finished uni that I would have ever considered to go and do myself. Like I just, that world of like really young people going to start companies was just not something you heard of very often. So it just wasn't on my radar, to be honest. And I actually was quite lost as a kid, like when I finished uni, as to what I wanted to do, and kind of followed the crowd, I guess, and ended up in the corporate world. And I think, during that time, which is obviously like, I started work at Barclays in 2011, you started to see a rapid rise of like, the startup movement and people, like the idea of quitting your corporate job and going to do something. Access to finance became, way more available. This is the time of like Airbnb and all these giant unicorns coming about. So I think that there was a little bit of like that world just really intrigued me, and I became really interested in like just admired people who went and did that and was courageous. But I think for me, the thing that was always missing was I just didn't know what it was that would make me want to quit. So like what would be the idea that would make me want to quit, that I felt so passionate about? Because I think when you've joined a corporate job, there was a little bit in me that was making sure that if I was going to leave that safety blanket, it was finding that thing that was going to really make up for a lot of the security that you leave. And I think you have to have a lot of passion, because you do lose a lot of security that comes with a normal, not a normal job, but, a job that obviously pays quite well and, gives you access to, certain security. So yeah, but yeah, long answer to an easy question, I guess.
No worries. And for you, if you're looking back, was it really important to start a sustainable business in particular?
I think so. I'm back to like over 2 years ago now. I wasn't necessarily originally. I wasn't thinking exactly that I wanted to start something sustainable. I kind of had this idea that I wanted to do something, and then it was actually like the Blue Planet kind of David Attenborough effect, I guess, kind of took hold, and that just left such a profound impact on me. Like I had this corporate job, which basically meant I nearly ate breakfast, lunch and dinner on the go. I was probably in a very consumption heavy mindset, not really thinking about, didn't have the time maybe, but also just wasn't processing it. I wasn't thinking about it. And then once that started and I was like, wow, okay, I'm actually a massive contributor here. And I became like a lot more mindful. And then you start looking for options to things to switch to, and you see that nothing really suits you or is speaking to you. I think that was the kind of spark. It was like, okay, there's definitely there's this opportunity, which I think you have to be like, think about when you start a company, like, is there the opportunity there? And it felt like the opportunity was there. It felt like I was really, really aligned to it. So I felt really, really aligned to it. And it felt like the right, blend, the right opportunity to go for it. But yeah, it wasn't what I started off thinking to do, but it quickly became apparent that was definitely what I wanted to do.
Right. Yeah, that's amazing. So do you think that if you're already aligned with the values of your business once starting, it's a lot more easy, I think, to really get into it and to really also spread whatever you want to have as impact on the world?
Yeah, I think when you start something, and it can be anything, it doesn't have to be like sustainable, but I do, from having met loads of founders now and built a network, generally being obsessed with the problem you're trying to solve and being really passionate about it, because it is so much work. I think the biggest thing that I've learned is like that kind of glamorization of startup world is something I'm really not anti, and I understand why it exists because it's a media and it's a sexy story to sell. But like the reality of it is like, it's a lot of hard work, and it also is really mentally tough. Like it's all consuming generally, particularly in the first 5 years, I think. And therefore, if you're not incredibly passionate, or you're obsessive of the problem, I think and what you're trying to solve, I don't think it will give you enough motivation to keep going. Now, obviously, there are people who start companies because they're motivated by the money and the potential of like launching a new unicorn or whatever. But for me, that's just definitely not my motivation, because to be honest, I think I would have stayed in banking because I would have been enjoying a much higher salary. Like for me, it was very much like giving that up. The motivation of that one day Circla could be, a company that is really big. It was just never my motivation, because to me, I'm still not sure I believe that's ever gonna that's gonna happen. It's not something I'm banking on. I just wanted to build it into a sustainable business.
And when you first launched Circla, what were the first steps that you took to make sure that the business model and the operations were sustainable?
Yeah, I mean, I think I went on like a bit of a journey when I started Circla. So I basically kind of got really into the problem and like looking, and like initially it was around plastic and waste, and then there was a lot of talk around moving things to a circular economy. I became really fascinated with that, particularly around packaging, and I didn't really have the idea or the solution. I started speaking to loads of different companies and loads of different brands, and I actually ended up at I kind of had the outline of what the business would look like, and I ended up at a hackathon around plastic waste, and I ended up pitching kind of the idea for Circla, and someone kind of ended up tapping me on my like an investor ended up tapping me on the shoulder, and they were like, look, I think you've got something there, but how you're looking at it from a B2C model, which is how we have it today, they were like, we just don't think it's going to work, but if you focus it on a B2B angle, we think there's huge potential, let's explore. So that was quite a strange way for Circla to kind of start. And at the time I was still working full time at Barclays. And it was really like this, they're called Sustainable Ventures, and they're one of the largest investors into sustainable businesses in Europe, definitely. And they have an accelerator program. And then I got onto their accelerator program, and that's kind of how the journey of Circla started. But yeah, I think going back to your question of like, did the idea of building a sustainable business and values, that's always been at a core of what we do. And I think that's what makes running a sustainable business a lot harder, because there are thinking things through like that and putting all those values and constantly putting that value first, it does mean that sometimes you are you're maybe not able to grow as quickly, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I often encounter is that people struggle as well with being sustainable, and then to the extent to which they want to be sustainable. Like everyone who starts a sustainable venture, they want to be as sustainable as possible. But then there's so much pressure from the outside as well to have every single step very perfectly executed as well. And then, in my opinion, it often leads to greenwashing because they are trying to be as sustainable as possible and they really have the right intentions. But because of the outside pressure to be perfect in every single way, they're just trying to look in a way that they're not really as sustainable as they are. Have you ever encountered a problem like that where you felt pressure to be sustainable, but then
definitely
really didn't?
Definitely, like all the time. And we just take the approach of being really honest and transparent because sustainability, whether it's your own personal journey, like you as a consumer or you as a business, is a journey. You're never going to reach. No one can be zero waste. Like no one can have no impact on this planet unless it's just physically impossible, right? So I think we need that whole notion and that whole concept, which I do see lots of brands moving away from now, is, I welcome it because I think it provides an enormous amount of pressure that actually makes people feel like it's not attainable. And it actually then doesn't move it into the masses. So we would never describe ourselves as a zero waste brand. Of course we create waste. Of course we have an impact. And therefore, so like I look at it, for example, at the moment, I'll just take our packaging, for example. So, I mean, I know this is a podcast, I can't show you, but, at the moment we use glass. Let's say this is for a body wash. It comes with a plastic pump. It's got a label. And yes, okay, of course, we're collecting as much of that packaging back. It's getting washed. But if just thinking through that process, you have a plastic pump, they can't be reused. That's a waste stream. You have a label. We're just moving to reusable labels, but the backing paper of a label is a waste stream. The washing process creates water waste. So we're never going to be perfect, but what I think we can do is commit to ourselves to say, okay, are we aware of everywhere that we're having impact? And are we on a journey to minimizing that and being as mindful as possible? And I think that should be the goal of businesses and consumers over this obsessiveness and also just outright impossible goal that I think also just doesn't feel inclusive.
No, absolutely. I agree. I think what you said about transparency, that's really the way forward. Just being transparent of what you actually do, what's the impact, and then reporting on it, communicating it. And that also helps other businesses, again, to do better in a way that's attainable.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we've made quite a few videos and, on our social media platforms talking about what's wrong with our packaging, being really honest, saying this is what we're working towards, and we're trying, but we're also struck by funding, and we're not Unilever. Like I don't have millions in the bank, so I've also got to be mindful that I've got people to pay and I've got a business to run, and ultimately I have to think about those things as well. Like how do we keep going? Because ultimately, what is better for the world? Something like Circla potentially existing or not existing at all because we've tried to do everything at once. So, that's a balancing act.
All right. And then within your brand, apart from sustainability, also really focus on ease and convenience for the customers, right? How do you vet all of the products that you are offering to your customers, and what kind of criteria do you put in place to do so?
Yeah, great question. So we're not a certification body. So Circla doesn't want to create kind of like, a certification to say this is sustainable and this isn't. What we do say is that sustainability is really, really broad and has loads of different variables, if you wish. And I think one thing that I really would like people to be able to do is to be able to kind of look at what values might be important to them, because the reality is that we can't and we don't all have the capacity to be able to look and not care. It's not saying that you can't care, but be able to understand everything. I think we can create criteria that are important, to ourselves and the way that we live our lives. So what we've done is, I also believe that there are certain things that make a brand potentially more sustainable and that they're going a bit further than others. So for example, a beauty brand, and this is very different for food, for example, but a beauty brand being vegan is very different to a beauty brand that is incredibly conscious of like where the ingredients are coming from, what, you know, are the ingredients organic, what's the impact on biodiversity, where are they transporting them from, you know, are they where do they source their packaging from? That to me is very different to just saying we don't have beeswax in a product, because that's much more to do with the protection of animals over sustainability in the way that I think of it, which is kind of emissions, waste, you know, kind of impact on impact on the environment. But that's not to say that it's not included in sustainability. So we've built a kind of a matrix that has different weights on 10 different values. And when we speak to a brand, or we look at onboarding a brand, we score them across those weighted values, and as long as they reach a certain score, then we say that they can be onboarded. So for example, we wouldn't just accept a brand, this is the most common one we see, that's cruelty free and vegan, because to me it's like, well, if you're using, you know, your products are being made in China, they're being shipped, to me that just doesn't scream sustainability. Or if you don't know your supply chain, or you're not paying your workers fairly, that's just not a company that I think we want to work with. So definitely. It's nuanced. And I think that's exactly how brands flip into greenwashing, because it is complicated and very broad, but it's easier to just, you know, consumers now have like got the word that vegan equals sustainability. And that's why brands are slapping it on every shampoo bottle. But most of those products were always vegan, you know? Right. So it's just a lot of it's marketing. And that's obviously a big, big frustration.
Have there been any lessons that you learned throughout establishing these criteria? Is there anything that you maybe added as a criterion at the start, and then now you're thinking like maybe that's not the right one, or things you've added along the way that are becoming more and more important?
I think a big thing for us now is really trying to break down what we call it as like we have it as kind of like low emissions, and the bit that I'm trying to unpack at the moment is breaking that down into words that are still consumer friendly and people can understand. But like I want to probably break it down as to like this company, because there's obviously people who are going to be kind of, you know, net zero, and obviously people who are just, you know, like offsetting their emissions, and we just want to probably break down what low emissions means and break that down a little bit more. We've never actually added a value for a company being B Corp. And I'm, you know, like generally if a company's B Corp, they're obviously going to be suitable, you know, for Circla. But then again, not always, right? Because you have, for example, the likes of like Innocent Smoothies. I mean, we don't sell smoothies, but to me, like that wouldn't be a brand that we work with, because, you know, they use an enormous amount of plastic and single use, so it wouldn't necessarily be, you know, so it's how we also look at a company and what their commitment to that is. One thing that we all ask for is a commitment from the brands and kind of understanding the circular economy, and then making certain, you know, kind of commitments to reducing their own packaging from their own business model. So that's obviously really, really important to us. The other bit that we have split out is kind of purpose driven and impact led. So we also look at, you know, a company that donates to charity is obviously amazing. But again, if you think of that as a value for us, that's lower down, because generally that's an easy step that businesses can take, compared to a business that has really built in kind of a purpose into their business model. So for example, we work with one of the companies that really, really focuses on getting women into employment who may have kind of not been able to access employment. Now, to me, that's the nuanced difference of like, that is a true, like building that into your business model to just saying we donate every month to charity. Like those in my mind are different things, and we've learned to split them out and not keep them in the same category over the last year.
Okay. And then jumping a little bit to raising investments, because raising investment is really important for a lot of founders. I think most businesses will go through a certain stage where they are going to need to raise finance. Was there any specific event that made you realize that you really required external funding, or that you always know that that was going to be needed in how you wanted to scale your business?
I mean, for us, it was always needed, and it always will be needed, because this isn't like a candle business, you know, where you've just made a product and you can make it at home. Like, this is full infrastructure and an operational process. It requires cash flow to manage stock. So it was just always something that would have needed funding and investment. We're changing the complete way that people consume and throw away and dispose of products. For me, I would have never quit Barclays unless I had received funding. It just wouldn't have been feasible. I don't think it's a brand that could have started without funding.
How did you feel about raising investment? Was it a scary time or was it exciting?
I'm just about to start for the third time that we're doing it. The first time it felt really surreal because it was part of the accelerator program. I mean, it was a really, really small investment. So it was sort of surreal. I didn't really know what was going on. I didn't understand it. When I raised, last year, so 2021, January, it felt really exciting, but it was also just so terrifying. Like, I think there is so much, it's like being on a constant dating show, you know, like you're constantly up for criticism. It's relentless. You constantly have to be speaking about yourself. You get a lot of rejection, and it's really, really hard work. So it felt obviously absolutely amazing when I was able to close the round, but it was also equally terrifying. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And a question I get a lot, because I work a lot with founders who are trying to raise, for example, sustainable finance, or they want an investor who really aligns with their values. And at the same time, it's not like you have a lot of options to choose from and that you have the luxury of setting a lot of criteria for your investors. So how did you go about with that? Did you really want an investor to align with your values? And did you manage to kind of steer in that direction as well?
Yeah, I mean, so obviously our largest investor is Sustainable Ventures. So they've got the largest equity, obviously excluding me, and they're obviously aligned to sustainability, like it says it in their name. When I did my second round, my lead investor was SFC, and they're sector agnostic. I think they really love the business and they got it and they were really on board and believed it. And I think, to be honest, I think if an investor is investing in your company, they're most probably either seeing that that's an opportunity and therefore believe in it, or they believe in you. So I'm not that obsessed with just getting investors who only believe in, only focus on sustainability. Like, we have angels that only invest in specifically, we have an angel who only specifically invests in circular businesses. But to me, I think if I could find a Joe Boggs off the street, talk to them, and they believe in the idea, I think that is equally okay, because it shows that someone is seeing this as a potential. And that's the whole point, is that you want, you want it to be believable that this is actually something that, everyone sees the opportunity of, not just people who want it to exist. Because that's very different, is that sometimes with a sustainability investor, it's stuff that they want to exist because they're big firm believers in, they believe in the problem and they want a solution. But it's different to people seeing it, that they want it to exist and then that they believe it can be an actually viable business model. And I think those two things are equally as important as each other, because you don't want to just start a business that's not going to grow and it's not going to have an impact. So
yeah, absolutely.
We've got a mix of investors too that are super sustainably aligned, and then I have two investors who, I'm not saying that they don't care, but they're more sector agnostic, but they've just I really believe in this idea and I think it's the future and I want to invest. And I think, yeah.
And do you have any advice for purpose-driven founders who are looking to raise finance and who are quite uncertain about how to proceed with raising finance, especially if they want it to be more sustainable or come from investors that align with their values?
Yeah. I think you have to show that there's a business model and that you're not just fixing a problem, and you have to show that there is an environmental problem to be fixed, because that's the kind of the hook, if that makes sense. But you also have to show that there is a consumer demand for it, and then that there's a business model to be made out of it. And I think all too often, and I have people reaching out to me looking for advice, and I'm just like, and people haven't thought through those three individual kind of pillars having to kind of come together. I think the second bit, and this is my advice for anyone raising investment, is that you need to be prepared for like a lot of work and a lot of cold calling and like turning yourself into a salesperson, because that's ultimately what you're trying to do, is sell your business. So, get prepared to send hundreds of emails, hundreds of reaching out on LinkedIn. Be prepared to like be scouring LinkedIn to see you as a connection to someone, reaching out to them, and all that stuff that generally just feels really uncomfortable. Like if you're not prepared to do that, then you're going to really struggle to raise investment, because it's not just about like making a deck, sending it out, and like the world's going to receive it. It's intense and it's a lot of work. And you need to be kind of really, really resourceful. Like investors didn't just land on my lap. It was loads of like messaging someone, a friend who I saw was connected to someone, being like, hi, do you mind? Here's an intro. Could you mind? And then chasing that person up and then chasing them again. So you've got to be quite determined and resourceful is my big piece of advice.
Yeah, and it goes back to what you said initially, right? If you really believe in your own idea and your own model, then you'll be able to make it through like that, and you'll be able to stick to your values. If it's really working, if it's really something that you're passionate about, then you'll get through it.
Yeah, you'll get through the embarrassment of like having to ask and things like that. And I think it is just uncomfortable. I think running a business or doing anything like this, you constantly feel in your real discomfort zone, and as humans we all want to feel in our comfort zone, and I think that's one of the things that I struggle with constantly. Like when I have to do something I've not done before, whether it's raising investment, my instant body kind of shuts, it kind of shivers, and it's like, oh no, and it's that feeling of like, right, let me rip off the plaster, let me come back to why I'm doing this. But yeah, that is a large part of it, is being in a lot of discomfort and embarrassed often, I find.
So finally, what is next for Circla, and where can people find it and get in touch with you?
Yeah, so we are just about to expand to all of London within the M25, which is huge for us. We are going to raise investment towards the end of March. We're opening a funding round, which will be really, really exciting. We've just received a grant to develop our own packaging. And then, for me, I would also, like from a business perspective, it's onboarding more and more brands, building out the team as well. And we've also got a pop-up which is going on to Portobello next week, which is from the 7th to the 11th of March, which is, well, I think when this comes live, it probably would have finished, but I'm really, really excited about that. It's like our first kind of big retail experience, and we're doing it with 40 other circular businesses, so really, really excited for that. But in terms of where you can find us, we're online at www.circla.co.uk. You can follow us on Instagram at circla_, and I'm ashamed to admit, but we are also on TikTok, which I think is _circla. So if you want a real giggle at a millennial attempting TikTok, then please go give us a follow.
TikTok is actually kind of fun once you start doing it. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah. And then all of my conversations with guests with a quick fire round where I ask some questions and you can just answer anything that first pops into your head.
Mm-hmm.
If you had to start over, would you do anything different?
Yes, I would have hired an immediate co-founder, or found a co-founder, or hired someone immediately who had a few years experience to go on the journey with. And
have you had any struggles with being a sustainable business in particular, with maintaining profitability?
We haven't from a profitability perspective, but we have from a growth perspective. So the biggest thing for us has been expansion and finding the right partner that gives emission-free deliveries to be able to expand within the M25.
Mm-hmm. Who inspires you?
I think other businesses. So I'm really, really inspired by some of the brands that we work with. So Anna, who's the co-founder of Upcircle, I think they've just been on an amazing journey, and they're like an absolutely stunning brand. And yeah, I think the network of particularly women who are running circular businesses, I think in my network it's probably 80% women, of the 40 brands that are coming to our pop-up. And yeah, I know how tough it is, so I'm just always constantly inspired by other people who've decided to do this.
Right. And finally, where do you want to be in 10 years' time?
Yeah, on a beach. I think in 10 years' time, I would love to be able to have seen Circla expand, like kind of to multiple cities, and for it to just be a regular way that people shop now, you know, and that we are all like that. The idea that we would throw valuable packaging in the bin after one use just becomes like something that's like bonkers to us. And the norm is that we go back to reusing and being more mindful of like our planet's resources. So yeah, that's where I'd like to be, all whilst managing it sat on a beach, not in miserable London.
Sounds amazing. Yeah. So thank you very much for speaking with me today, Claudia. Is there anything else that you want to end on, or anything exciting that you want to share?
No, I think I covered everything, but yeah, Great. We really, really appreciate people coming to follow our journey online. So yeah, I'd be really grateful to people to have a follow.
All right, amazing. So if you enjoyed my conversation with Claudia from Circla today, please like and share and subscribe for more conversations with inspiring founders that you can support on your journey to an impactful business.